Okay, so we're going to start with the basic 12 volt solar system. First thing you need to do is have a controller. So if you look at this controller here, this is an 80 watt controller, and your solar positive and minus goes in here, battery connection positive and minus, this is for 12 volt DC, and this is the load where you would actually attach this product, which is the inverter. So I bought this inverter for 53 bucks last year on sale, and even though it's not a pure sine wave, you won't run most of the stuff in your house. Some of these new refrigerators, you might need a pure sine wave. So this inverter has a negative, positive, and a ground on the back. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mount it upside down like that to someplace underneath the shelf. And you got 3 outlets for 120, and this is your on and off switch. The next thing you need is some batteries. Now for this controller I've created a couple of pigtails, and this is 10 gauge wire, which is standard for a lot of solar panels that are off grid for the 12 volt systems. And you'll notice these connectors right here, these are called MC4 connectors. And so I'm going to go ahead and mount the box, and I'm going to go ahead and install these first so that I can run my solar panels to the unit. Okay, so you can see here I mounted the box, and there's also a little thermostat that comes with this that you plug into the top. That's how it knows how hot the batteries are getting. And I have my positive, my negative MC4 connectors applied. And simply, I already have some solar panels around that I plan on using that are connected in parallel. So I'm going to hook up the positive first, and I'm going to leave the negative until the very last part of this to test the controller. But you want to make sure you tug on these and they don't slide out. Another thing is, always use a screwdriver. Never use one of these to tighten any wires on your controller. You can strip out the threads. Okay, so you can see I've got the battery cables attached to the load section. This goes to the inverter. There's the inverter, and I've already attached the wires, and then I'm just going to go ahead and mount this to the cabinet down here, and I'll show you that in a minute. But red is positive, DC positive 12, DC minus 12. The next step will be to do the batteries. Hook them up, and I'll show you how to configure those. Okay, so now I've got the unit mounted, and I lowered this controller a little bit to give me more wire to work with. So let's wire up batteries. Okay, so I got a couple of 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate batteries, also known as LiPo4, and I'm going to hook them in parallel, which means side by side. You connect positive to positive, negative to negative, and remember, on any DC system you always connect the positive first. So let's get our cable on here. And our other cable along with the battery connection. Now, one thing I like about these LiPo4 batteries, or lithium iron phosphates, they're very lightweight and they're a lot easier for women to handle. So if you think about that, because a lot of the batteries that you can get, like these lead iron phosphate batteries over here, they weigh about 60 pounds. And that's nothing for a lady to be holding most of the time, pulling and moving around. So now when you connect batteries like parallel like this, you put the positive on one end and you put the negative on the other end to make sure the batteries balance out properly. And what these lithium iron phosphate batteries have is what's called BMS, that balances out the charge between the batteries so you don't get bad results. So, pull these other batteries out of here. That's probably not a good idea to wave it around a positive lead. Now remember, we have that fusible switch, fusible 100 amp hour, 100 amp switch that I have attached to this. So it's not actually connected to the ground yet, and I won't connect it until I get this attached. So there's still no circuit being completed. If it wants to go in there, it's being stubborn today. So I'll wrench down the positive leads first, and make sure you use an insulated ratchet just in case, folks. Well, the fact that I'm touching that, not going to make much difference, is it? Now if I was to connect these in series, I would go positive, negative, positive, negative, just like it sounds. So, and I have this other system turned off also that's right next to it. It's a lure system, because I want to reduce the shock hazard. Because you can get shocked with DC voltage, and it's a lot more potent than AC. 12 volt battery can kill you. For me, it would probably just make me excited, to be honest with you. I've been shocked so many times in my life, it's not even funny with high voltage. I'm going to curl these up like that. I'm going to shove them back there because I like to keep them out of the way. There. I'm just going to go ahead and complete the circuit. So before I go any farther, I'm going to actually complete the solar panel setup. And I don't have a switch on this because I don't plan on switching between different panels. Okay, it took a few minutes for the EMS to level out and the batteries. That's took a little delay. But now I turned on that. Now that's powering the greenhouse lights. The thing about lithium-ion batteries is batteries versus these lead acid batteries. You can only run those down 50 to 60% and they have to be recharged. So if you have a 100 amp hour battery, you can run it down to 60 or 50 amp hours of charge, and then it has to be recharged. Lithium iron phosphates and lithium ion batteries, you can discharge them down to 10%. So that means that you get, in this configuration in parallel, you add the amp hours, so that's 100 amp hours, another 100 amp hours, that's 200 amp hours. And you can run that for 90% of the time, you get 180 amp hours. I'd have to use almost 5 batteries to replace these 2 batteries for the same amount of charge. Because if you have 5 100 amp hour batteries in parallel, that'd be 500 amp hours, but you're only going to get about 50 to 60% of that, so you're going to get about 200 to 250 amp hours of usable time. Whereas I'm getting, just with 2 batteries, going to get 180 before I have to recharge it. And also be careful on these lithium ion batteries. Not all BMSs that equalize the voltage out are the same. Some of them will tell you can't put these batteries in series. Sometimes they'll tell you can put 2 in series. This one you can put 2 in series. And the ones I bought for the new updated system, you can put 4 in series, so I can get a nice 48 volt DC system when I go for a different system. And the higher up you go in voltage, the more efficient your power is going to be, and it's going to charge a lot more, a lot faster. So at 12 volts it's really not the most efficient. 24 is better. 48 volts DC for the battery system is the best. Okay, so as you can see here, this controller now is charging. It's daylight, and it's right now the battery's at 13.4 volts. It's 85% charged on this battery bank. Now the power the voltage off is 14.4 for the limit, and 10.7 is when it'll drop off and turn off the load to the inverter. Now this tells me how 16C tells me what the battery temperature is, okay, and it'll turn on the load. When I turn this button on to turn everything on, it'll only start up at 12.6 volts. Now you can adjust this on this unit, and when I said 80 watts I meant 80 amps on this unit. So as you can see, this right now shows the amount of current that's being pushed to the batteries, 2.7 amps, and the solar array is charging. You can see the little arrow right here flashing. Now this little light bulb thing is for the actual load, so we're going to go ahead and turn it on and see what happens. Okay, so we turned it on. You'll see that the battery has dropped down to 77, flashing between 77 and 75, 70, 80% charged. And right here, you can see how many amps are pulling right now, 20 amps. Now, on this unit, I needed to make clarification. This is 80 amps for 24 volts. This unit is a 12 or 24 volt amp unit. 12 or 24 volt unit DC. So you're going to get difference is that when you run it in 12 volt capacity, you're only going to get about 1,000 watts. Okay, when you run it in 24 volt capacity, you're going to get about 2 kilowatts of power. The higher you go in voltage, the more efficient your machine is. And I actually could just put those batteries in series and run them off of from the ground to the middle post, and a 24 volt system would be more efficient. However, when you do that, you don't get the exact voltage you would get if you ran it across the 12 volts. It could be a little much higher depending on the battery's BMS system for balancing out the voltage. And so there we go, the system's up and running, and it's right now about 13 volts on the batteries, and it's pulling about 20.3 amps for all those lights I got over there. This is powering the solar greenhouse. Now this right here, this could run a refrigerator with no problem. Could it run my great big freezer? Not really, because the big freezer I got, stand-up freezer, can pull about 35 amps at any given time in DC current, not AC. DC current. Direct current is different than AC current. So this little system is a good backup. I could run my refrigerator and my little freezer on this if I had to. And I have another system that will run the great big freezer and a few other items. And I also have another system which you might have noticed is a wind and solar unit, which is much more complicated, and I've done some videos on that. Alright, thanks for watching. Hope you like, subscribe, and come back for more on this channel.